Hello, everyone. Hola. Welcome to the Graduate Alumni Panel, which is happening because of Graduate Appreciation Week and also because of the LASU Young Scholars Conference. And this is our first date, and we are so excited to end the day with this panel and a reception after. So for today, we have 5 panelists, and I'm going to introduce each of them, and then we're going to start. Xóchitl Bada is a professor in the Department of Latin American and Latino Studies at the University of Illinois, Chicago, here in the Zoom, where she has been since 2008. Her areas of specialization include migrant access to political and social rights, migrant organizing strategies, violence and displacement, and transnational labor advocacy mobilization in Mexico and in the United States. Her latest book, Scaling Migrant Worker Rights, How Advocates Collaborate and Contest State Power, published by the Berkeley University California Press, was awarded the winner of the 2024 American Political Science Association, Latino Caucus Best Book. She is here today in the alumni panel because she graduated with a PhD in sociology from the University of Notre Dame in 2008. So welcome, Xóchitl. Then we're going to listen to Pablo Forni, here in present. He is a senior researcher in the National Council for Scientific and Technical Research of Argentina, CONICET, director of the Institute for Social Science Research, IDICSO, and full-time professor of sociology in the School of Social Science of the Universidad del Salvador in Argentina. His research focused on the role of Pope Francis theology in grassroots social movements in Argentina. He is currently a visiting fellow here at the Kellogg Institute, and he's here today because he holds a PhD in sociology from the University of Notre Dame, where he graduated in 2000. So welcome, Pablo. Then we have Karla Adriana González Serrano, also here. She's a postdoctoral scholar in the University of Notre Dame at Thomas Sullivan's Biophotonic Lab in the Department of Electrical Engineering. She collaborates with the startup Nearwave, which intends to develop a novel handheld optical imaging system to aid detection of breast tumors, as well as to monitor and predict chemotherapy response early during the treatment. With her team, she seeks to bring this technology to the clinic and patient point of care in high and low resource settings, both in the US and abroad. She received her bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering from the Tecnológico de Monterrey in Monterrey, Mexico, and a master's in electronic systems from the same university. Today she's here because she's an alumni, and she earned her doctoral degree in electrical engineering from Notre Dame in 2022. Welcome, Karla. Then here on the Zoom, we have Noé Pliego Campos. He's an assistant professor of history at Wabash College. He is a historian of the Global South with a focus on the late 20th century Latin America. He recently published an article titled The 1986 World Cup During Mexico's Neoliberal Turn in Mexican Studies. Currently, he is writing a book on youth in the 1980s Mexico City, shaped politics and the economy during that decade. In particular, he studies divergent expressions in youth with attention to youth affiliated with the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, UP's Young Professional, Chavos Banda, a Mexico City subculture composed of marginalized poor and the queer youth. In addition, he offers on the history of Latin America, gender and sexuality, and film. He offers class. Today he's here because he earned his PhD in history at the University of Notre Dame in 2023. So welcome, Noé. And last but not least, we have Ruth Solarte. She's an assistant professor of Spanish at the Department of Modern Languages in St. Mary's College. Her research interests focus on the cultural and political normalization of different types of violence in Latin American and US Latino territories from the perspectives of biopolitics, history, gender, and memory studies. Ruth examines contemporary literature and visual arts as a space of symbolic resistance vis-a-vis violence against women in territories struck by authoritarian regimes, armed conflicts, marginalization, and migration. Her research proposes crossing and connecting scholarly geographical limits that have been traditionally delimited in the Southern Cone, the Central American Isthmus, and the Latinos in the US. Today she's here because she earned her PhD in Spanish at the University of Notre Dame in 2022. So welcome, Ruth, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're really happy to have you. First, we're going to start with a small presentation. They will talk a little bit about their lives during the PhD and after, and then we're going to open the floor for questions. So we start with Xóchitl.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure for me to be
Wait
here.
a little bit, we're going to turn up the volume.
Oh, do you hear me? Do you need me to turn up the volume?
No. We're turning up the volume here in the auditorium.
Oh, okay, good. All right, so you tell me when I can continue. You give me a signal?
Now. Yes, now.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sophie.
Do you want me to keep testing?
No, it works. So thank you. You can start.
Okay, now, okay, good. So thank you again for the invitation. So, well, I've been asked to tell you a little bit about my life and what has happened since I was at Notre Dame. So, well, I want to start by saying that I moved there in the year of 1997 as an F2 dependent with that like a visa status. My husband then was doing a PhD in nuclear physics, so I'm Mexican, and I arrived with my partner at Notre Dame, and who had been admitted to the Department of Physics for doing nuclear astrophysics, actually. So then I tried several times to gain admission to the Department of Sociology, but it was difficult, so I finally was successful in the year of 2001. So in between, I went to New York, and I went to the New School for Social Research. I got a master's in political science. Then I went to the University of Chicago as well, and I had another master's with a concentration in sociology there. And by the year of 2001, I was finally successful, and I entered the PhD in sociology at Notre Dame. And what I did after graduation, so I spent a total of 8 years at Notre Dame, so 4 as a student, and the rest as I said, as a wife of a PhD student. And after I graduated, I got a Sorin postdoctorate at Notre Dame. So that was one of the multiple applications I submitted after finishing my dissertation. I defended in 2008. So I had the opportunity to submit multiple applications. So I remember that when I graduated was the year in which the economy started a tremendous recession. So I was a cohort that was very fortunate to be the last one that had an opportunity to submit multiple job applications. I remember, if I remember correctly, I think I may have submitted about 40 applications or so, and among those, I also requested postdoctorates. I was very happy that when I received the good news that Notre Dame was inviting me to return, because I had moved to write my dissertation as a fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center for International Scholars, and I was then living in North Carolina. So I had this option to return as a Sorin postdoc, but I ended up taking a position as an assistant professor in the Department of Latin American and Latino Studies at the University of Illinois, Chicago. So first I got a position as an OPT, as optional practical training, for my first year. And after that, I was switched to an H-1B visa, and I had 2 cycles of an H-1B visa, and when I came up for promotion, then the university decided to sponsor me for gaining a green card. So I just have no complaints about all the possibilities that having an education at Notre Dame afforded to me. I was very lucky to always be in the possibility of having enough funding. The Kellogg Institute was very generous when I was starting my pilot for my dissertation. I did my dissertation on collective remittances in rural Mexico, so I had to do extensive traveling to measure the type of infrastructure development projects that migrants in the city of Chicago were building in multiple places in Mexico. So the Kellogg Institute gave me money to start my pilot in 3 states, in the states of Michoacán, Jalisco, and Zacatecas when I started. And so that really helped me a lot to finish on time and to be able to continue my data collection, thanks to some additional support that I got from the Woodrow Wilson Center for Scholars. So what I would like to share with you that it's important thank you for all the questions that you submitted. So I hope that I was able to touch some of the multiple questions with this quick presentation. But I would like to finalize by saying that what is the most important thing that you need to be doing now for thinking about finding good jobs is that you need to take advantage of this great opportunity both at Notre Dame and at the Kellogg Institute to make connections beyond your department, make connections by attending national conferences, build a very good network, and also whenever possible try to get advisors outside of Notre Dame. When it comes to advising, I will say the more the merrier. If anyone wants to adopt you outside of Notre Dame as an advisee, you always say yes. So advising is super important at this in this moment of your career, and you also have the possibility of taking advantage of tapping a more than one job market. Many of you speak multiple languages, so you can submit applications to the US, but also to your countries of origin, to Europe, to many other places. And you even submit applications to places where you may think that you are not a good fit after reading the ad. You may be surprised that sometimes committees will start reading lots of applications and they may change their mind after reading yours. So do not be deterred by the fact that you may think, oh, I'm not a good fit for this position. If you find that you see yourself working at that place, go ahead and send that application. It doesn't take too long to submit, and you may be surprised, like you may be called back. So I would like to end it here so that give it the opportunity to all to speak and also to have a chance to get a round of questions from the audience.
Thank you so much, Xóchitl, and now we move on to Pablo.
Good afternoon to everyone. I am glad to be here. It was a surprise to be invited to this conference, a good surprise for me. In my case, I arrived to Notre Dame on 93 in order to complete my MA and PhD at the Department of Sociology. I had a fellowship from the Kellogg Institute. The name was Latin America 2000. It was a special program sponsored by the Coca-Cola company at Kellogg. And so I was part of a cohort with other Latin American grad students at different departments, mainly, but not only in social sciences, from different countries too. I when I arrived, I remember now, when I arrived to Notre Dame, my first meeting were with, well, I remember Guillermo O'Donnell and Father Bartel, the directors of the Kellogg Institute in those days, in this same building. And, well, Professor Samuel Valenzuela, that I cannot believe is in front of me now after so many years, was one of the first persons that I met those first day or week at campus. I knew him before because I read some of his work on labor movements in Latin America and Europe before coming here. And, well, the Department of Sociology was a very American department in those days, mostly American professors and grad students. So there was one Brazilian student, I remember, when I arrived, but he was finishing his PhD, so he left soon. And the year after came a student from Uruguay. And, well, in the first year, I took classes with Professor Valenzuela. I remember on comparative studies, or it was a methodology class, basically, that I still remember and I still use in my own classes back in Argentina. And I also have another Latin American professor that passed away, that was Professor Da Silva, that was also a professor of social theory at the Department of Sociology. Those are the two main Latin American professors that I remember from those days, and two important professors for my education here. I completed my MA, that was a theoretical work, but my PhD involved intensive fieldwork in the slums of Buenos Aires, of Greater Buenos Aires. It was about grassroots organizations and social movements in those days at the turn of the century. So after 4 years in a row in campus, I began a period of coming and going between Buenos Aires and Notre Dame, doing fieldwork and coming back to work on my dissertation with my committee and so on, coming and going several times until I graduated in the spring of 2000. I should also remember here we have the present director of the Kellogg Institute. I mentioned it, Guillermo O'Donnell. Well, he was an Argentinian. Now we have another Argentinian. I don't know why, but it's a fact. That is Professor Perez-Linian, that in those days used to be a good neighbor at the Notre Dame apartments, a few blocks from here on Notre Dame Avenue, for many years, with other Latin American grad students there from different countries. In my case, well, my dissertation was accomplished with support from the Department of Sociology and the Kellogg Institute in different moments. I don't remember well the names of the fellowships and of the programs. In time. I graduated in 2000, and actually, well, my experience is a little different from the rest of the panel, I think, because basically I had no plans to stay in the US. I just came to study, to complete my PhD, and my plan was to go back. So that is basically what I did. And in my case, with a degree from Notre Dame, the first challenge was, as a couple of professors here told me in those days, and was true, and there when I arrived to Buenos Aires, is to go back into mainstream academia down there. That is different from here, and nobody knew me there because I spent so many years here at Notre Dame and in the US. So that was a challenge, but actually my degree from Notre Dame opened different doors there soon. I noticed that as something good or something very good. So I was teaching immediately after graduating. The same year I was teaching at first at Universidad de San Andrés and Universidad Torcuato Di Tella. I was teaching at Universidad del Salvador, where I am still working on after so many years, and also a couple of years later at Flaxo, at the Latin American School of Social Sciences at headquarters from Buenos Aires. And well, I had more offers that I needed in those days to teach. And later I entered the National Council of Science, the CONICET, that is the main agency is a national agency for doing research in Argentina. So the education that I received here, the classes, my experience, the experience that I got from different professors and different researchers in different areas. Also, maybe I should say that I never said this, but in my area exams were classical social theory or social theory and organizational sociology or sociology of organizations. I don't remember now the exact name, but I was demanded to present a syllabus of different classes as part of the exam. And actually, I think that I spent a decade teaching classes based on those syllabus that I prepared here for these exams. So that was a good idea coming from the Department of Sociology in those days. I had already prepared classes, or basically prepared classes that I was teaching a few years after that. Also, having a degree from Notre Dame opened doors in other places, not only in Argentina. 3 years after graduating, I was working in a research program with people from MSU, from the Department of Economics, on social capital, forms of communal social capital and civil society. And well, I was part of that team, and I was working with researchers at MSU, at Michigan State. And it was also useful for presentations to be visiting professor or research fellow at universities in different parts of the world. Just to mention, in Mexico, I was a visiting professor at the Universidad de Colima, and in Brazil, Universidad Federal de Bahía, and in Europe, in Spain, Universidad de Sevilla, and in Germany, Freiburg University. And more recently, even in Asia, I had been as a fellow at Seoul, Korea, 2 years ago. So basically, always being part of Notre Dame and being a graduate PhD from Notre Dame had been important for academic opportunities for me, even still today, after so many years.
Thank you so much, Pablo. Karla?
Hi. For me, I first came to Notre Dame as a visiting student. I was a master's student at TEC de Monterrey in Monterrey, Mexico. And I had studied biomedical engineering, which is a field that's very interdisciplinary and allows you to help with a team of engineers, scientists, and physicians to produce technology that physicians wish that they had to improve care, but that limit them because it's not available yet. So I knew I had to specialize, and I started with my master's in electronic systems, and I had the option to do the experimental part of my thesis somewhere abroad. And when the option of Notre Dame came across, it really piqued my interest. And I became the first student of a research collaboration program between TEC and Notre Dame to come here, first graduate student. And I was just going to be here for 7 weeks. But the research went really well because my research team was very friendly, very generous with their time. So even though it was a new field for me, it was outside of the area of my master's, because that's how sometimes it happens with these research collaborations. I just ended up in a different department altogether. So I needed to get a lot of training of how to use equipment, how to do new procedures to make like gold nanoparticles. And I was expecting things to go slowly. And because of that, maybe not much being accomplished in 7 weeks, but everybody was very friendly, very generous. And my lab environment was great. Also, we did a lot of things together. So I thrived. And my advisor was very pleased with the results. So he invited me to come back for a full semester. And I said, well, I would love to, but I need funds for 2 courses I would need to take in order to finish my master's in time and then apply for the PhD program. And he said, yes, we'll do it. So then I was able to take my 2 classes. I took integrated circuit fabrication, which is a really cool class. I don't know if you've been to Stinson Remick right next to this building, but there's a clean room, which is a very specialized lab. People wear bunny suits, so like these white gowns that cover everything except their face, in order to keep any particles off from themselves, off of the nano or microelectronics or other devices that they're making. So very specialized facilities that I was able to get some experience in. I would end up with the recommendation of the professor who was the electrical engineering chair now. He recommended I apply to a PhD program, which I did, and I ended up teaching that class, TAing that class several times, which is one, maybe you have heard, you end up making, if things go well, all semester long, if everything goes well, you end up making a chip that, well, a whole set of chips, but they play that Fighting Irish song. They do other useful things, but that one's the more cool one. And so I got a sense for what it would be like to work in micro and nano electronics. And I, as a biomedical engineer, I wanted to help perhaps work on implantable electronics because I was super interested in implantable electronics that could help a patient that has severed nerves to bridge the gap and be able to communicate the information to the other part of the limb. Bionic eyes, being able to restore sight. I had been a visiting student at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and they had an artificial eye project there, and it's an implant. It's an electronic implant. So I like the idea of learning about how to make this electronics, this micro and nano electronics. And I worked for my same advisor in chemical and biomolecular engineering, and I had my main electrical engineering advisor. I had various projects related to industry. So I worked closely with our IBM collaborators part-time. I've also had, at the beginning of my PhD, like second year, I think, we had a visiting researcher from Toshiba from Japan who was great to shadow. There's a lot of things in nano fabrication where you really just need to see how it's done and the level of OCD pretty much that you need to have in order for things at that small scale to work. So I was able to learn a lot. And I think that's in general a good trend that I've seen in my studies, that if the lab had a senior member that was able to coach me a little, or at least like direct me in the right way, that made a lot of difference in how fast I could pick up a new project. And in engineering, and especially electrical engineering, our funding tends to come from business industry partners. So in my case, my project changed many times, which in the moment it was like, no, I want to see this through further. But looking back, it got me experience with many different kinds of electronic materials, and it kind of broadened my experience to be more interesting, perhaps, to employers, and certainly to be able to interface with researchers that have worked with many of these materials, many different kinds of projects within chemical engineering and electrical engineering. So I would say one of the things that at the moment also made me kind of stressed out was that I had come in to a particular lab initially, but the funding didn't come through for that advisor. So I ended up having to rotate labs and eventually pick one. And the uncertainty at the time, I did not like. But again, it was something that exposed me to different styles of running a research lab, different lab cultures, different fields. It gave me practical experience on how to run different types of things that I still use to this day. So I think there's a lot of things in grad school and in life that in the moment can seem very stressful and undesirable, but that looking back have their fruits. So it's good in the moment to try to find those because they're there. So if we trust that there are some fruits to the experience, we might not be as stressed out about it. And so during my PhD, I was able to take a biophotonics class, which is, it studies how light interfaces with tissue so that we can use this information to measure components of tissue like water, fat, oxygenated blood, deoxygenated blood. And then we can use this to detect when the tissue is sick, when it's a tumor, for example, because the composition is going to be different. And the professor had as part of the class, a writing of a grant proposal, and he had a competition, and so we did this. I did well. Me and another student, we got the recognition, and so he had a good impression. And so when I was about a year from the time that I was defending, although I didn't know quite exactly when I was going to defend, but I started conversations with him to look into me doing a postdoc in his lab because he did tremendously different work, really more biomedical engineering work where I would actually get clinical study experience. So I would run my own clinical trials, everything from writing the protocols to make sure that we are establishing what the objectives are going to be, how do we do this ethically, how do we not burden patients that are already going through chemotherapy and are struggling quite a lot. And it's exactly the kind of training that I was missing to then go back and do biomedical engineering kind of research. I had been doing nanoelectronics research, and I wanted to go back to apply it all to biomedical engineering. So in this case, we had enough time to look for the right funding. So you might hear postdocs going from nothing to I have a postdoc in like 30 days when the advisor has the funds for it. But if not, you might be able to open options that are not apparently there if you have enough time and you find someone that you can work with and you both would like to write some sort of fellowship application or just your advisor has enough time to get the funding. So it's good to keep in mind if you know already to start those conversations early, it can open extra doors. And so that's the group that I joined. I work very closely with a startup that spun out of this lab. And so it's been an interesting experience because it's been the experience of being a postdoc in the academic world, very different from a postdoc in industry. But it's also a lot of work for a startup, which is very fast-paced, and it's in some ways a little more like industry, but a very particular niche of it. So I've had the experience of just how fast-paced it needs to be, how many hats you need to wear. And I am running a couple of one clinical trial that is ongoing with chemotherapy patients that we have a new device that is about the size of a phone, and it uses light to quantify the components of tissue. And this has been proven in bigger formats, but we're trying to prove it in this smaller format that we can use this to predict whether the chemotherapy will work, but very early in the treatment process. So instead of knowing whether it worked 3 or 6 months after the chemo has been done, through a biopsy, for example, at the very end, we would know within 5-10 days with this technology. So it's something that could really help to avoid toxicity that's unnecessary for the patient. If the treatment is not working, we can move them on to something else. So it feels like very meaningful work. It's, of course, a lot of work, and doing it for a startup as well, it's quite intense at times. But I like that I can see, especially when I see the patients and how they're going through things and they understand how this technology could make such a difference for them. It's very motivating, and it makes all the sacrifices worth it. And what else? Yes, I think during my time as a grad student, I enjoyed also being able to have all the cultural enrichment that Notre Dame offers. I like that I actually came here, so my building was next door, but I would come here for very interesting sociology courses, for example, classes, talks. So I think it's a very unique time of life, and this is an advice that the department chair has shared with us, to make sure you make the most of your time as a grad student and to make mistakes now in your work, for example, because your mistakes now are costly in time and maybe somewhat in money as well, but they're not billions of dollars, and your whole job is not necessarily on the line. It's just the pressure is less. So it's good. It's less than it's going to be for sure later. So it's good to make mistakes now, learn as much as you can, and also just enjoy as much as you can, even though it's intense, but enjoy being a grad student, enjoy that you can just step into another building and immediately learn about a whole other world of interesting things that other people are doing, and learn to convey what you are doing to people in different disciplines. That's going to be very helpful when you're writing grants, or in general when you have an interdisciplinary team. And I would say also the cultural activities here, just to learn about people from other backgrounds, has been very helpful when having to interact at work with people from these very diverse backgrounds, faiths, parts of the world, to be able to understand where they're coming from and work more effectively. So what I would do is I would put in my calendar anything that I thought would interest me, and then decide in the moment if I could actually make it, because of course we're very busy, and maybe an experiment that I cannot stop has run long and I just can't do it. But if I did not do that, then I wouldn't go to anything at all. And before I know it, I would be feeling isolated and burned out. And I think also in these interactions, you can find that people are struggling with some of the same things that you are. And sometimes people just don't know that, and they have even more imposter syndrome, and they feel like there's something wrong with them. And so being able to have a support network, working on having some sort of group, club activity, something that you like, that you can go back to when you're feeling tired, when things have not gone very well and you need a break, it actually can make a lot of difference overall in your mood and the energy that then you can put back when you get back to work.
Thank you so much, Karla. And now we move on to Noé.
Can y'all hear me? Just want to verify. All right. So good afternoon. First, I want to thank Alejandrina for inviting me to participate in this panel. Second, thank you to the team who helped her put this panel together, and thank you for those in the audience for welcoming the five of us today. So as was mentioned, my name is Noé Pliego Campos, and I'm currently in my 5th semester as a tenure track professor at Wabash College, located in Crawfordsville, Indiana, which is about a 3-hour drive south from Notre Dame. My research focuses on youth politics and culture in 1980s Mexico City, but today I'm going to talk about how advocacy for myself and with others, as well as support systems, have really shaped my experiences as a Latino in academia. To do that, I'm going to first talk about my life before Notre Dame. Second, I'm going to talk about my experiences while there. And third, I want to talk about my current experiences as a brown Latino professor at Wabash College. So I was born in a rural town in Guerrero, Mexico in 1994, and by early 95, I was living in Concord, North Carolina, which is a small town. When my family arrived there, we were part of a small group of Mexicans in a mostly white and black US American community. This meant that all the services were provided in English, which in turn meant that my parents struggled due to the language barrier. As the oldest child and the first to become bilingual, I then became a translator for my parents and extended family at hospitals, courts, and jails by the age of 5. Through this practice, I learned to navigate tense situations and how to advocate for myself and others. Obtaining these skills and abilities early on later helped me during my academic trajectory. Growing up in the US South also meant growing up with the living legacies of racial and economic inequities. In practical terms, this meant that I grew up going to school with people who, for the most part, did not look like me. This became more glaring in middle and high school when I started taking advanced, honors, or AP courses. In those classes, I tended to be one of maybe 5 students of color within a group of maybe 30 to 40 students. In addition, with very few exceptions, most of my teachers were white. At the same time, I was lucky and never had a teacher tell me that I wasn't good enough for those classes. If anything, teachers and staff encouraged me to continue in those courses. I then graduated high school in June of 2012, and in doing so, I became the first in my family to graduate high school with honors and to pursue a 4-year degree. And at that point, I had one plan in mind, to major in history and to obtain teaching certification so I could become a high school teacher and coach high school soccer. But then I went to UNC Charlotte, where I was able to draw from my previous experiences and learn how to seek out and develop support systems. The first support system was a learning community that I only applied to because it seemed like a cool opportunity. It wasn't until much later that I learned that the learning communities were part of an institutional effort to help first-gen students like me succeed at UNC Charlotte. The second support system was made up of faculty in the history department there, who encouraged me to think about graduate school as a possibility. Among them was Jürgen Buchenau and 2 Latina professors, Dr. Sonia Robles and Audrey Henderson. Robles and Henderson provided me with representation in this profession, which I thought at that time was mostly just for white people. And they also opened up their offices and listened to me talk about my academic interest as well as my personal life issues. And I'm forever grateful to both of them for that. With the encouragement from this faculty, I decided to pursue a master's in Latin American Studies. I then graduated from undergrad in 2015 and then completed my master's in 2017. Alongside pursuing academic goals, I also got involved in campus and community activism. Pulling from my experiences as a translator as a child and the historical knowledge I was developing in my classes, I participated and organized in protest against student tuition increases, transphobic state laws, state violence against Black Americans, and unjust immigration laws, and much more. The academic knowledge and academic advocacy skills that I had developed as a young Latino helped me as I transitioned to Notre Dame. So now I'm going to talk about my time in living in South Bend and being a student there. My first day of Historian's Craft, a required course for history students during the first semester, was a rude awakening. That was because when I walked into the classroom, I realized that only 2 other students were visibly of color. This shock, the general difficultness of a PhD program, and knowing that many of my colleagues were from private universities made my first month at Notre Dame pretty rough. And it got to the point that I started to question my being there. However, one day we all finally met up for socializing at Legends. While there, I got to know my classmates at a much more personal level. I also learned that most of them were struggling with the same classes like I was. On the one hand, that made me feel less isolated. On the other hand, it made me realize that I was doing okay for someone who had had public education their whole life. In addition, I also remember that for most of my education, I had been one of few students of color in the classroom. And that helped me realize that I belonged there and to enjoy what I was doing. At Notre Dame, I sought out support systems since that previously helped me at UNC Charlotte. I also tried to meet other graduate students with similar beliefs and ideas as me, and my friend Karla Villanueva, who graduated a few years before me and today is a union organizer, was key to this. She introduced me to different working groups, provided me tips about which faculty were supportive of students like us, and she also helped find a writing group, which has become a friendship group since then. I also started a working group with a group of classmates that we sustained throughout the pandemic and my dissertating year. In addition, I worked to make Notre Dame a little better because I generally believe that we might not fully transform a place, but we can leave it slightly better than how we found it. For example, I contributed to efforts by graduate student workers to demand insurance coverage for reproductive health care. I also pushed for more racial diversity in the history department when it came to who they hired as well as who they accepted into the PhD program. And as a VP of mentoring within our graduate student org, I created panels to support first-year student transition and advocated for advisors to get training on how to be more supportive mentors. These are things I felt confident in doing because of the lessons I acquired as a child and as a teenager and practiced throughout my undergrad and MA studies. And I was able to graduate in May 2023, and it was a very special moment for me, my wife, and my family. In August 2023, I started my tenure track position here at Wabash, which is an all-male student body of about 800 students. And of those, about 25 to 30% are students of color, and it's also located in a small and mostly white central Indiana town. I mention this because due to the competitive academic job market, academics of color don't always have a choice about what part of the country we get to work at. And this means that we not only work in very white schools, but also overwhelmingly white communities. When my wife and I first moved there, people stared at us, and we didn't know if it was because 1, we were new to the area, 2, we were visibly of color, or 3, because we wear masks. But we think it was a combination of the 3. Moreover, during my first faculty meeting at Wabash College, I felt very similar to how I felt during my first day of Historian's Craft. I was in a room, and I was maybe one of maybe 10 faculty of color in a room of about 60 to 70 people. Before that moment, I knew the faculty was white, overwhelmingly white, based on the website, but it was different to inhabit that space and to see it and to feel it. In addition, during the first few months while being here, I also experienced race-based microaggressions. A colleague saw an image of my wife and me and in response stated, quote, "That's gangsta," end quote. A few weeks later, another colleague saw me wearing a guayabera and responded, quote, "Oh, you're dressed very casually," end quote. I'm fortunate that my wife was there for me during these experiences, as well as friends within academia and other institutions to talk about these microaggressions that they also experience. More recently, in March 2025, I decided to cancel a course on the history of Mexico for fall 2025, the semester we're currently in, that included a trip to Mexico City during Thanksgiving break. I canceled the course and the trip because of my concerns about the safeties of students and my own, because U.S. government officials were harassing and worse, kidnapping people as they tried to re-enter the country. Unsure of where the political environment was going to be this upcoming November, I canceled this course. Once I canceled the course, I wrote a letter explaining my decision to the dean of the college, which I then sent to the campus community, with the goal explaining how government actions impacted learning experiences and opportunities. While I got some support from some of my fellow colleagues and some of the students, I also got a lot of anonymous hate. This included one student stating that they sent my email to ICE, which worried me since this was within weeks of ICE arresting several graduate student activists, and because ICE on campus would have represented a threat for other community members as well. Another person made a comment about the fact that I wear a mask on campus and I wear stickers, which I assume is the badge that I'm wearing right now. And this type of hate made a suspicion that I had very real. There are students on this campus who dislike me because I exist as a brown Latino faculty member on campus, who does not shy away from condemning a genocide nor racist anti-immigrant government practices. On the positive side, I've drawn from my personal experiences to support students of color in the same way that Sonia Robles and Audrey Henderson helped me. For example, I welcomed a first-gen student of color who during his first year struggled a lot, and talk to him about my experiences as a man of color in academia and outside of it, and to share with him resources and advice that helped me. By the time I saw him again during the middle of his second year, he seemed way more confident. Also, as someone who is very vocal about their support of queer people as an instructor and in campus life, I've had the privilege of being a trusted person for closeted and openly queer students. Moreover, being one of the few faculty of color, I have assumed the responsibility to participate in college recruitment events when I can. By being there, I try to show the prospective students and their families that there are faculty of color at this institution and that we want them to succeed. Lastly, in addition to advocacy and support systems, the third and last point I want to share with grad students across the board is to remember that you are so much more than your labor. For me, this meant that I needed to remember that I was much more than just an academic, especially when I was dissertating and on the job market. Today, I'm a life partner, a son, a brother, an uncle, and a friend to so many people. I have value outside of academia, and remembering that is what empowers me to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noé. And now we move on to Ruth.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this invitation. I would like to start saying that I'm from Colombia. I studied in a state university that is called Universidad Pedagógica de Colombia. It means that when you go there, you made the decision of become an educator. So I had that clear early in my career. And the system is different from here, but to make it similar, it was like I made a double major in Spanish and English with that concentration in education. I want to thank my mentors since that time because I didn't know that there was the possibility of coming to the United States to have a scholarship, have a stipend, and be able to pursue higher education. So it was a mentor there who showed me that path. He recommended me in a school in Wisconsin that is called Carthage College. They have an excellent program for a master in education, and they receive students from around the world to teach languages. They call it the TLE program, Target Language Experts. So, and there in that place, I also have another mentor who showed me, like I took English classes, literature, and he told me that maybe I should continue a master in Spanish. So again, he explained to me everything. I went there, and I don't know, those transitions for me were easy to enter in these programs. But then when I applied for PhDs, it was not that easy. So I had to apply to different schools, and the other limitation that I had was my family. So I couldn't move to other states. So I was basically looking for schools in Illinois and in Wisconsin. And then my advisor for the master's in Spanish, she talked to me about Notre Dame. And that year, it was after 3 years of applying schools. Meanwhile, I was working as an adjunct, which was a very good experience for me because it built my resume in teaching. So I don't say like I wasted my time, because meanwhile I was acquiring experience. I also tried to write an article. So my advisor told me about this school, but it was kind of late. It was May. So anyways, I contacted here the department, and they said that they have accepted all the PhD students. But if I wanted to do a year in a master's in Spanish, and maybe apply for the next year for the PhD, and I did that. So thank God I was accepted the following year, and it was also they took those classes in the PhD. Here in Notre Dame, I work with Professor Maria Rosa. She was my advisor, but anyways, I'm so thankful with everybody in that department because they helped me a lot, like all the professors in every class. It was something that I really thank them, because it was clear, like your final paper needs to be an article. And it was kind of in many of those classes, I transformed those papers with their help in articles. And then when I graduated, it kind of helped me to have a strong resume. So I also want to thank the Kellogg Institute, because with like the working groups, for example, the history working group that we had, I attended to that. It was, at that time, was Professor Jaime Pensado. So and also all the scholars that came and visit. So I kind of helped me a lot to kind of understand many things in terms of interdisciplinary studies. And also I remember the last year, they have like a meeting, and they invited, like similar to this, they invited people who had graduated, but it was more in a classroom. So we had the opportunity to ask a lot of questions to them. And it was very good, because at that time I hadn't went to interviews yet, but many things that they told me kind of I kept in mind when I was interviewing. And that's, for me, I need to be sincere, the hardest part for me in the career was like searching for a job. Like the dissertation for me was good. I was disciplined with my writing, the defense. But then when I never expected that interviewing was like so difficult for me, especially, and I think because English is my second language, I feel that I didn't have the same confidence when I talk as when I talk in Spanish. So I noticed that it sometimes affected me in the interview. So I would recommend to you that prepare very well, because sometimes you think that your resume is enough. It's not. You can have a good resume, it help you to get the interview, the first round interviews, but it's when you have to, like, you are like 20 colleagues applying for that job and they pick 3 for the campus visit. So I also was in the job market 2 years. I was fortunate, I got a campus visit. I didn't get the job, and then I was ready to do the postdoc here. But I was very fortunate that at St. Mary's College, they open a visiting position, and I got that job, and then transformed that position in tenure track. So that's another thing that I wanted to say, because many people say, no, those visiting positions are not good. And actually, I didn't take one in Bada College for that reason, because I was afraid that I had to move to New York and then come back. And so I didn't take that, but later I talked to that person, and he said, no, they transformed this position in tenure track. So it's something that I want to say, apply for everything, especially if you don't have like, you are not a resident, or like you are like have that pressure of a visa. So apply to everything that is there. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. This is really good, so exciting. I have many questions that I planned, but I wanted to give the opportunity to do that. The audience first, if anybody wants to ask a question right now. Yes.
Oh, thank you so much, all of you. Thank you for sharing your life stories and your professional beginnings. I actually have two questions, one for Pablo and one for Ruth. Pablo, I wanted to ask you if you can delve a little bit much into your return to Argentina, how you contacted these institutions, how you reinserted in the academia life after so many years in United States, your strategies, what did you do? I mean, your CV, did your research in Notre Dame help, or you had to change a lot? Did you have to do emphasis in teaching or research? I mean, all of that, anything you can tell us. And Ruth, I mean, I wanted to thank you for speaking about the difficulties of the job market because you graduated not so long ago, so you experience what is like, I mean, kind of nowadays. And it's very important what you said about the the visiting positions, because we still have professors in the Department of Spanish who, I mean, don't fall into account that, you have to apply for everything, not just in your track, because I mean, the job market is really hard. So that's very important. Thank you so much.
In my case, the first thing that I would need to explain is that the process of getting a job in university is different from the US. It's more based on face-to-face contact and interactions. So I remember while I was doing my fieldwork there, I began making contacts in different social science schools, in very different institutions and universities in the area of Buenos Aires. So I was invited to present my going on research of my dissertation. So when I graduated, I knew and I had been seen by different institutions. So it was basically a continuity. The emphasis of universities in Argentina is basically on teaching. It was almost only teaching in those days. So I was basically teaching these classes that I just referred, this undergrad and later a few graduate classes. And the continuity of research came 2-3 years after I went back, because I have to went to it is a difficult process and more formal process to enter the national system of research, the CONICET. So I remember I applied twice because it was very difficult. It's a national concourse, it's a national system, so it was difficult to enter it, especially in those days. So once I entered this federal system, I continued doing research on the same that I had been working basically on my dissertation. So basically it was a continuity. It was a 2-3 years gap in the middle that I was basically involved in looking for different, or where I would like to teach, or what would I like to teach. So I began in one university, moved to another, and ended at my alma mater, that is Universidad de Salvador, basically because it had a sociology department and I was interested in teaching sociology, not political science or economics, for example. I remember that kind of situation. And also a few years later, I entered the FLACSO, the Facultad Latinoamericana de Ciencias Sociales, because they had a new PhD program, a brand new PhD program in Buenos Aires. So they were hiring professors with different backgrounds. So mainly have studied in Europe, I would say, in France, in Germany, in England. So I was in that group, was the only one that had studied in the US. So it was interesting for them. So I was teaching there soon. But I had to find my own way of doing so. What I was really concerned about that when I finished it, I remember the conversation with the professor from the sociology department, Lynn Spillman, that she asked me, well, now that you graduated, that your number of friends organized it like in a small party when I graduated that night. And I said, well, which is your concern now? What are you looking for? And I said, I am concerned with moving back and having difficulties to find the shop. Somebody will pay attention. To me, what was not the case, actually, because of what I had been saying too. It was important for me to visit the different places, offered conferences, participated in workshops, brown bag lunch, and that kind of events while I was working on my dissertation.
I wanted also to say that I didn't mean to scare you guys about the job market, but actually that's for the Spanish. I noticed that, you know. And about what I was saying about the teaching positions, the visiting positions, is because I was observing the market so close. I realized that, for example, that opportunity that I said that I didn't take in Vassar College, it was tenure track, that's why I interviewed. And then it seems that they didn't approve the position, and then they called me to see if I wanted that. But I talked with different professors, and they say, yeah, but what if they don't approve it anyways, and you only move over there for not? So then when the St. Mary's College position was open, then my advisor told me, take it because it's closed, so then you don't have to move. And another professor told me, when you go again to the job market, it is going to be better that you were a visiting professor than in our field, no? In other fields it's different, but than postdoc. So he said, especially because I was looking for teaching positions, they wanted to see that I already had that teaching experience, you know? So that's basically, and as I said, the lecturer positions too, like for visas is another possibility. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Xóchitl. I know she has to go. But thank you so much for being here, and we are excited to know you, and people can email you maybe if they have questions for you. So thank you.
Sí, gracias. Me puedo quedar 5 minutos más si alguien tuviese una pregunta para mí. Y
Ok.
si no,
¿Alguien tiene una pregunta específica? Si no, yo tengo una general.
Vale.
Que
Sí.
un poco, Noé y Karla hablaron quizás un poquito de eso. Sorry. Noé and Karla talked a little bit about that. But I was wondering for everyone, and we can start with Xóchitl, besides the research, we had a question about what other things you did during grad school, or what do you think we should do to develop other skills besides research? Is that needed for the job market? And if that was helpful, if you did it when you were going to find a job?
Absolutely. This is a great question. I think Notre Dame is the best place to acquire all sorts of skills because you can always get a second language. They will not charge you extra for becoming proficient in a third language, and since the PhD lasts enough years, you can master a new language. That will be an invaluable skill for field work, for finding a job. That's super important. And take advantage of all the opportunities that the career services offer for being able to write different types of resumes. So it's super. The career services at Notre Dame are awesome for those who would like to dabble in both job markets, the academic job market and the traditional academic job market, and the route in which you are only interested in doing research without teaching. Those require different ways of presenting yourself and what is your strong skills. So the career services are excellent resources for helping you to tune your skills. There is also opportunities of learning to code. Learning to code. Notre Dame has so multiple programs. The library is also a good like resource to learn like new techniques like Python or any things that you think like will be good for specialized skills in social sciences, where like think tanks may be able to hire you. I think like this is every moment that in your free time that you could spend to learn a new skill in the many years that you will be there, it's super important. And also cultivate good friendships. I've been since 2008. I haven't been at Notre Dame, and my group of people that I cultivated there from the Department of Physics and the Department of Sociology, we meet very frequently. We take trips together, we go camping, and in 2 years we are trying to organize a super important, I think it's been 25 years since we entered or something. We've been counting, and we are going to meet in England. So people live everywhere in the world, so like Notre Dame is very good for like keeping people together. I hosted a few months back my friends from Brazil who I met while I was there. So take advantage of the great resources that the university can provide to you. So that would be my advice. And I don't know if Noé has a different advice on that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about. So I got hired at a small liberal arts college, so it's super teaching focused. And while at Notre Dame, I knew that I wanted to be go. If I did get a teaching or a tenure track job, like ideal would be a SLAC, right? And so I took advantage of the Kano Teaching Center, right? And so I got one of the certifications, the one where you attend 5 of the meetings, right? And the lessons. And unfortunately, I didn't make time to get the second one. But I do think I applied to a teaching institution, and having that as part of my CV, I think helped out. The other thing I did pursue was the gender studies minor certification, and also the screen culture certification. And I think that kind of gave my application some other angles where they could see me teaching in different avenues here, right? My department is a four tenure track or tenured people and 1 visiting professor. And so we have to be able to cover a bunch of different areas, right? So I do research on 1980s Mexico City. I ended up teaching a class on world history up to 1500, right? So I was on both ends of the historical timeline, right? The other thing, like I'm currently teaching a class that brings together all of my studies with a history of masculinity and films from the Americas, right? So I was able to take kind of these outside opportunities and bring them into the classroom. So I do say take advantage of that. And again, it might be cheesy, right? But like, remember to be yourself outside of your research. I know that doesn't seem like it's going to be productive as you're applying for jobs, but I do think it matters. And like, if your body and mind are healthy, then it's much easier to sit in front of that laptop and write those documents that you need to obtain that job, whether it's in academia or it's outside of it.
I would add Notre Dame has some science communication workshops that I think are they combine improvisational comedy with science communication, which seems like an odd combination, but in general, this idea of practicing talking to people with a whole other language, even if it's like quantum mechanics, for example, the way that a physicist talks about it is different than a chemist and an engineer. So it's a good exercise to talk to people from other disciplines in general and make the effort of being in an uncomfortable position of not quite knowing what they're doing and having a hard time explaining what you do in a way that's understandable. But it's a crucial skill because you're rarely going to be maybe at a conference or within your own research group, but rarely you're going to be talking to people that know exactly what you're talking about. Probably you're the expert in your subfield, your project. You always have to be working your skills to communicate your research in a clearer way. It helps to build collaborations. I, for example, for my work, have had to start new collaborations with oncologists. So they're not even engineers or at all scientists, and it's a whole other world. So as a biomedical engineer, for example, that's one of the things we need to do. We need to build bridges between disciplines in order to get everybody to work together to generate a medical device solution. So very important skill. I think Notre Dame offers a lot of opportunities to do so. One other way to do it is join clubs that are in meeting points for different departments and different colleges even. And interactions, I don't know in your experience, but at least from my experience, I was the chair of the nanotechnology grad student and postdoc group for a couple of years, and students are very shy. It's kind of comfortable to just, if we had a luncheon, to just eat at their desk quietly. And we would have like a professional development talk and then time for mingling, and then, oh no, time for mingling, I must escape. And then they would leave. And it's uncomfortable. Of course, it's uncomfortable to be in a room full of people you don't know, but it's a great experience for when you go to a conference and you have to approach people that you don't know. It's a good exercise. It's okay to be to feel that awkwardness maybe, and learn and practice ways to bridge the gap with people that don't do what you do. And also great friendships can come from that. You never know when a stranger that you're meeting is your next good friend that you just haven't met yet. And also it gets easier as you do it more, because then as you go to more events, you know more people. So you're not the only one there that you, without no one else as a friend. So it gets easier. And one of the things we did at ND Nano that really worked was to be intentional about having activities that make people talk to each other, even though they don't know each other. So having meaningful conversations for 2 minutes with good questions in mind. So like practicing, keeping in mind some questions that are good conversation starters, to talk about something deep that's memorable. And in general, when introducing people, trying to squeeze in something like that, other than like, what department are you in and when did you start, and these like resume style items that are forgettable. There are other questions that are meaningful and that start really interesting conversations, and you might forget the person's name and you might forget what they do exactly, but you might remember that they love to cook and that they did this amazing new dish from a remote land and it was awesome. And that's a conversation starter next time you run into each other. So in general, good practice, bridging the gap with others, I think this is a great place to do that.
Another thing that I wanted to say is like, here we have in Notre Dame, the Center for Social Concerns. So I also kind of encourage you visit that place and kind of attend the workshops, because it gives you ideas how you can, for example, connect your work, your research, your classes with community service. And sometimes in some schools, they want you to do that. So I have been in interviews, they ask me if I would be interested in doing that, if how I would do it. So it's kind of at least good that you have an answer for that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. I have one last question, and it has kind of like 3 parts. So the first part is looking back. Do you wish you had done something differently during your PhD or in your job search? And are you satisfied with of where you are? Have you ever experienced burnout, and what helped you recover or pull through that experiences? So it's 3 different questions in one. I don't know who wants to start.
Can you quickly repeat the second one? I missed that one. Sorry.
And the second one is if you are completely satisfied with what happened after your PhD and where you are now.
I guess I'll start. Do I wish I'd do something different? Not really. The only thing that I did regret in the middle of dissertating was not translating a term in my head. So I study yuppies or young professionals. And during my 10 months in Mexico City, I forgot that it translates to profesionista joven. And so just having that blind spot ableist term, but not missing that idea like really kicked me in the butt once I was dissertating, and I was like, oh my God, that could have been another way to have gotten at some of my research. But besides that, I really enjoyed my time. I made the best of it. And going back to one of the comments one of the co-panelists said, right, like enjoy being a grad student. Like I thought it was dumb when my faculty advisors were telling me, but like I do miss the act of just reading a book and going into a classroom with other people who read it and just want to engage with ideas. Like that is something that I miss on a daily basis. So I know it sounds cheesy and it's annoying to that sometimes you want to do something else when you have to read something and go to the classroom, but I just miss that experience. So I that's something I will say. Satisfied, yeah. I love that my job at a teaching institution is to teach. And so I'm really happy that I get to do that. And burnout, I was close during dissertating, and the one thing that did help me was going to a comedy show. My wife had bought tickets for us, and I was on the verge of not going because I needed to finish a chapter. And she's like, nope, we're gonna go. And I was, upset about going, but once I left, I felt so much better. And again, I was able to kind of do some mental and physical resting, right? That allowed me to sit in front of that laptop the next day to do some of the work, right? So yeah, those are my answers for those 3 questions.
Okay, in my case, yes, I am satisfied with what I did and what I accomplished here at Notre Dame, as I said before, the beginning. And the only thing that I would maybe regret or that I would have done differently, but I can see that years later, in this moment not, was that not taking classes in other departments. Maybe, I don't know, history, economics, political science, I don't know, philosophy, I don't know. Different, no, I have many ideas now, later. But in those days, when I arrived here, I was very interested in studying sociology and learn American sociology. I came to Notre Dame to learn American sociology. So basically, I was focused on that, and I was focused on the sociology department and on the academic life of the Kellogg Institute. So I had cross-listed classes with political science, one with economics, I think. But later, I would say I would have taken classes in other departments about topics that I am interested in. So later I read and I studied and I learned on my own on those fields. Having all that was a pity, having given all the opportunities that you have in campus.
No, I'm very satisfied with my career. As I said, perseverance was what I had to do when entering a PhD and getting a job. But I'm very happy with the end result. I think I was thinking of what Noah said about missing class. Yes, and I don't miss the final papers, especially as we writing them. But yeah, that environment. So enjoy that. Read for your classes, because then when you are out, you are gonna miss that. And yeah, and also I agree with what you said about not taking classes in other departments. Yeah, I did the same. Only took one class in the English department and mostly Spanish. So yeah, it's something that you should explore. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I really haven't been able to have the interdisciplinary training that I would need for biomedical engineering in a place that I love, because I do like Notre Dame. I was going to be here 7 weeks and I'm still here. So I do like it. I think for the kind of work that I did in a clean room, the experiments can be very long. They can take days, and there's points where we can stop them. But then there's other chunks where you just have to go, and it's very intense. You can't leave, and in there you can't drink water, you can't eat, of course. You can't take a break. It's very noisy. So it was very easy to get very stressed out. There's also like very dangerous chemicals that can kill you, and they all look like water. So if you don't budget into the whole process some sort of a break, good enough sleep, food that will fuel me, that I like. I remember at the beginning, I was running. My first year was crazy busy, and I never really had devoted time to cooking, and it really affected me in the moment that I said, okay, I'm done my first year. I'm gonna, in our program, there's a very real possibility that there, after a particular exam in this summer, that's like 6 hours long, much harder than all of the finals that you've taken. If you don't pass, you'll get kicked out. And a lot of students got kicked out. So I would get to see them take the exam that I was about to take, and it was their second or third time, and they had failed it, and like this was it for them, and like all their stress. And so very easy to get burned out just because of how demanding things are. Sometimes the equipment that you need to get the full nanofabrication process means you have to work very late or in the weekends. And so it was crucial for my mental sanity to have some enjoyment outside of my lab, which is why, like I said, I just put it in my calendar. And if I could take that break, I could. We have such great performers coming to the Barlow Performing Arts Center. We had Yo-Yo Ma, I think like a year or two ago. So we have beautiful ballets. And then there's all these cultural activities where you can learn how to make some nice knitting from Korea, or taste the food from faraway place. So, and of course, exercising. All these things seem trivial, but I knew one professor who won. He was at the football halftime, was given time to be recognized for being the advisor who had brought most money to Notre Dame through all the grants that he had written. And I knew how he had done this. So he knew that when it was grant writing season, he could stay awake all day, then go home at 5:30 in the morning. He had been writing his grant. Then take a shower, like sleep a little bit, eat, and be back in his office by 7:30 in the morning. And then do it all over again for 2 weeks. And he knew he could keep it up for 2 weeks, and then he would like collapse. So he would do this, and he was very successful at winning really large amounts of money through grants. But then what happened over time, I got to meet him when he was at the end of his career. He couldn't stay awake easily. So, we would be at a conference and he would be trying to stay awake, and he had like coffee with him and he would just doze off. I don't know. So I think we sometimes just think about, in the moment, this is what I need to do to push myself to accomplish what I want right now. And we don't think about what that's going to do. Our body's going to charge us the bill later. So if you want to maintain a certain level of performance over time, it'd be better to find more healthy ways to do it. It can be done. So, get the sleep that you need, do the exercises that you like, that you will actually do, that are good for you, eat well. These things are good investments, and they'll improve your productivity. And then knowing when to take a break. In my case, I could ruin hours of work and then be very frustrated and then want to be in the lab immediately and just like repair everything. And I'm not going to leave until I fix it. But I'm so exhausted by then that I could easily just ruin more things. So knowing when to take a break was very important, actually, to do a successful experiment and not waste more resources. So knowing when to take a break, knowing when to go for a walk. It's amazing what a short walk outside, like looking at trees and flowers and listening to the birds can do to your brain. We had, during the pandemic, a professor from Stanford who has done research on how we can induce joy and change the mood our brain is in through motion. So like, for example, skipping, instead of like walking, skipping induces joy in our brain. Doing activities together where you're moving in coordination with other people produces a sense of belonging. So like running together or dancing. These things that are ingrained in our body and that change how we might be feeling completely. So during the pandemic, a lot of people were being couch potatoes and being very depressed. And we had this meeting with her, this workshop, and we tried some of these motions like bouncing around and skipping and having these expansive motions. And it's amazing how doing that for like 2 minutes completely changes how exhausted I felt and like I cannot tackle this humongous obstacle in front of me to, oh no, I think I can do it. Yes, I'll just get it done. So sometimes you have to listen to what your body needs and provide that, but other times you have to kind of override a bad mood that your brain is in by putting in these other inputs like motion, music that induces joy. There's scientific research showing that there's certain songs that induce joy. So having a joy playlist for when you're feeling down, or when you need a pick-me-up, or when you need to get activated, and using it as another tool for your productivity. And just being very mindful that all of these breaks, all these things that aren't directly like you writing a paper, they also contribute to your productivity. So they're a good investment of your time. They will allow this off times allow your brain to process things in the background, to come in and see things with a fresh view. I can't tell you how many times I was like breaking my head with some issue. I stepped away, came back, and like immediately I saw what was the problem. So this is a good investment of your time. So good to keep in mind.
Thank you so much, Noé, Karla, Ruth, and Pablo, and Xóchitl, for this. I think we had a great experience, and we're really appreciative of your experiences and knowledge. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you everyone for coming. We have a reception after this, so everyone's invited to keep the conversation during the food. So thank you so much.